Hello fellow readers and readeresses. Half of this year is history, which means it's time for me to look back on all the reading I've done so far and bask in the glory of my success, or feel sorry for myself. Either way, it's gonna be fun, I hope. For this tag today, we have 15 questions, and I'm gonna try to be as concise and to the point as possible, but you know I'm a bit of a rambler, so don't expect too much, alright? Question number 1. Best book you've read so far this year? Alright, I had a bit of a hard time with this one because there were so many great books I read this year, but I think I'm gonna go with the one that I just finished 2 days ago, and that is A Ballad for Georg Hennig by Viktor Paskov. This is the Bulgarian edition. I'm gonna overlay the English version on top of it just for a second. This is a real-life story from the childhood of Viktor Paskov, and it focuses on the Czech-born violin artisan Georg Hennig, who moved to Bulgaria after 1944 and had a rather difficult life here. This is a very personal and moving story, and it explores the themes of poverty, friendship, greed, loneliness, and loss, among other things. It touched me very deeply, especially towards the end. There are 2 letters that had me sobbing uncontrollably. This is the Bulgarian edition, as I mentioned, as the author is himself Bulgarian, but the book has been translated to multiple languages, one of which is English, and if you can stomach deeply human stories that wreck you emotionally, I will highly recommend this one. Question number 2. Best sequel you've read so far this year? That will be The Trouble with Peace by Joe Abercrombie. This is an adult grimdark fantasy and the second book in the Age of Madness series, which itself follows the First Law trilogy. I read it in June as well. Great reading month so far, by the way. The series is technically fantasy, but magic there is almost none. We focus predominantly on politics and some of the most messed up relationships humanity has ever produced. So if you like smart characters who act stupidly, stupid characters who get lucky, all of whom live and die miserably, plus quite a bit of bloodshed and top-tier scheming, this one is definitely for you. Question number 3. New release you haven't read yet, but want to. Oh boy, where to begin? Of all the new releases for this year that I deemed anticipated and came out already, I have only read 2. And out of the ones that came out but I haven't yet read, I am the most excited about another 2. The first of which is Empire of the Damned by Jay Kristoff, which is an adult vampire, grimdark / horror fantasy, and the second book in the Empire of the Vampire series. I read book 1 back in 2022 and loved it. It was the best vampire book I've read so far, probably because it wasn't romantically themed, shall we say. And the second one is Foul Days by Genoveva Dimova. This is an adult fantasy, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm anticipating it very much because the author is Bulgarian, originally from this very city where I'm currently living, and the book itself is supposed to carry Slavic folklore elements, which I would be very curious to see in a fantasy book. Question number 4. Most anticipated release for the second half of the year. Oh, here we have an easy winner. Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson. This is an adult epic fantasy and the 5th and final book in the first arc of the Stormlight Archive series. I am so excited for this book and so scared of what this man is going to do to my favorite characters. And the weirdest thing is, I don't want anything bad to happen to them, but if it didn't, I'd be disappointed, you know? Speaking of disappointments, question number 5. Biggest disappointment. Oh, a very easy answer here as well. Only Human by Sylvain Nouvel. This is an adult sci-fi, allegedly, and the 3rd and final book in the Themis Files series. This book was such a terrible letdown because the author suddenly decided that what his sci-fi novel needed was to have all the science taken out and be replaced by mediocre, pseudo-intellectual social commentary and angsty teen melodrama. The plot, if you can call it that, was lame and uninteresting. The characters were preachy or neutered, but always exasperating to the extreme, and I was supremely bored and or annoyed the whole time. And all this following 2 great books in this series. They weren't perfect, but they were good, very good. To say that I'm disappointed would be a massive understatement. Question number 6. Biggest surprise. I'm gonna go with Women by Charles Bukowski. This is an adult, semi-autobiographical novel that tells the story of a poetry writer and his multitude of romantic encounters with a whole bunch of psychotic women. And if you know anything about me, you know that I'm rather uncomfortable with reading through sexual scenes, which are only about 90% of the contents of this book. But despite that, I liked this book and I read it obsessively for a few days, and if at any point I felt uncomfortable, it was because that was the author's intent. The whole thing was bleak and selfish and sad and human, and I liked it, and that surprises nobody more than myself. Question number 7. Favorite new author. Chuck Tingle, but only because of his great name, and if you think I just made that up, you're wrong. You can watch this video to confirm. Jokes aside though, I think I'm gonna go with Viktor Paskov, who's the author of the first book I discussed in this video, and because of said book. Besides him, I would like to also shout out John Krakauer, who's the author of Into the Wild, which is a non-fiction I also read in the month of June, again, great reading month, and which I will discuss more in my monthly wrap-up. Now mind you, I have only read one book of each of those authors, so my opinion could potentially change, but both of them left a great impression on me as of right now. Question number 8. Newest fictional crush. Very easy to answer here. I don't get those. Question number 9. Newest favorite character. I think I'm gonna go with Orso from Age of Madness by Joe Abercrombie. I like him because he's funny and self-aware, and he's also very relatable. He's not stupid, but he acts stupidly sometimes because of his humanity. He's earnest, mostly confused by other people's political machinations, wants to do good, but doesn't always know how to or has the courage to even do it. Like a lot of us on daily basis, just on a much bigger scale. He's bad at pretending and genuinely a good person. I like him, and I'm sure Joe Abercrombie is gonna punish me for that. Question number 10. A book that made you cry. This one. A lot. There is a lot in this story to make a person emotional, and as I think I mentioned in the beginning, there are 2 letters printed at the end of the story, followed by what is essentially a stream of consciousness by the author, directed at Georg Hennig, and this is where I fell apart. I literally needed a full day after that to recover. Now, is this book gonna affect everyone the way it affected me? No. We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are, and how a book is gonna impact you is largely gonna depend on what's already in your mind. But it's tough. And I felt it, and ironically, I'm happy for it. Question number 11. A book that made you happy. Well, technically speaking, all good books that I read make me happy, but I'm gonna go with the one that made me giddy about life like a little girl again, and that is Anne of the Island by Lucy Maud Montgomery. This is a classic historical fiction and the 3rd book in the Anne of Green Gables series. What a beautiful person this woman must have been to write such beautiful stories. They make me feel reborn every time I read them. I want to run through a meadow just for the being alive of it and chase butterflies and bake cookies and smell the flowers. This is the kind of happy her books make me. Question number 12. Favorite book to film adaptation. I don't really watch movies because I tend to fall asleep within the first 10 minutes of anything, especially if I'm watching it by myself. Matter of fact, recently I attempted to watch Into the Wild for a vlog that I ended up not posting. I wanted to compare the movie to the book because I loved the latter and I've heard great things about the former, and here is me attempting to watch it less than 15 minutes into it. I only watched 2 full movies this year, and one of them was Dune, which wasn't bad at all, so let's go with that one. Question number 13. Most beautiful book you've bought this year. I haven't yet bought a book this year because I've been on a book buying ban for over a year now, which by the way just ended 2 days ago, and I haven't yet been able to get to book buying. However, I got this book for my birthday from my mom. It's called Autumn Chills by Agatha Christie, and as far as I remember, it's a collection of short stories, and I think it's absolutely gorgeous. Question number 14. What books do you need to read by the end of the year? All of them. Let's look at the 2024 TBR and see where we've gotten to. This is a rough table of my 2024 TBR. Here on the left side you can see the titles of all the series that I deemed a must-read, and on the right side you can see the remaining books in said series. The first one is Skyward, where I only have the last book remaining, Defiant, and I think I'm gonna be able to read it before the end of the year. Then we have White Sand, which is a graphic novel series, and I only have one left, and I don't know why I still haven't read it. Then we have the Farseer trilogy. Again, I have only the last book remaining in it. Then Howl's Moving Castle, we only have one book remaining in that series as well. The Lycanius trilogy, we have 2 books remaining. I read 1 book this year from the series, but it was a reread of the first book because I had forgotten everything that happened in it. Then we have Remembrance of Earth's Past. This is going to be difficult because it's a very heavy sci-fi, and it's going to require a lot of cognitive power to be able to process. Then we have the Stormlight Archive series, where we also have only the last book remaining, but it hasn't come out yet, and I'm pretty sure I'm gonna read it as soon as it's out this time. Then we have Godkiller by Hannah Kaner. We have Sunbringer was the second book. I think it came out earlier this year, but I haven't yet read it. I don't know why. Then we have Powder Mage, and I really loved the first book in this series, and I don't know why I haven't continued with it yet. I really have to do it. Then we have The Winnowing Flame. I have the last book on my June TBR, and I already started reading it actually. Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn by Tad Williams. I just read book 2 in the series in June, and we're gonna talk about it in my monthly wrap-up, and therefore I only have one book remaining in that series, and the last series is His Dark Materials, where I have to read 2 more books in order to finish it, a total of 16 books that I've deemed a must-read by the end of the year, and 16 books is a very doable number. And question number 15, what are you currently reading? I am currently reading 2 books, neither of which is on my June TBR, while I still have 5 books on said TBR staring at me accusingly. The first book that I'm reading is Kushil's Dart by Jacqueline Carey. This is an adult political fantasy romance, if you can believe that there's such a thing, and the first book in the Phaedra trilogy. This is actually a reread for me. I read it for the first time many a year ago and recently recommended it to a friend for very specific reasons, and while thinking about it, I started wanting to reread it to see if I still find it as good, and so here we are. And the second book I'm reading is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This is an adult sci-fi thriller, and I have absolutely no good reason for currently reading it. I just wanted to read sci-fi one evening, and I looked at the TBR and there was no sci-fi on it, and I looked at my bookshelves and this book looked back at me, and I opened it just to see a few pages, and before I knew it, it was 3 a.m. and I was 150 pages deep. So there. This concludes my mid-year check-in. I have read 48 books this year so far, which amounts to a total of over 18,000 pages, and I'm really happy with this result, but I'm even happier that I liked the vast majority of the books that I read, which I think is the most important thing. Please let me know how your reading is going so far this year in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and if you would like to see some of the other tags that I've done, check out this playlist. Bye!